Hey there, Apano here. In this part of the tutorial series, I'll be moving away from character development and I'll be moving more towards developing the UI. So this includes stuff like the title screen, the stage select screen, the character select screen and the HUD. And with these, I'll be focusing on how to add transitions as well as music controllers so that you can add music to specific scenes. So I won't really be focusing on how to add more attacks and defensive options anymore, focusing more on the UI. Now within the UI, I'm going to be focusing on the practical elements of the scene. So things like previews, things like getting one part of the UI to interact with other parts of the UI. And so I won't really be working on the aesthetic. If you do want to add any creative design to the aesthetic part of the game, you can do that. I'll allow you to have creative freedom with that. So with that being said, let us hop into the tutorial. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do when we're making our title screen is start with a user interface node, like that, control node. And we're going to call it title screen. Now, the first thing we want to do once we've done this is actually save it. So we're going to do Control S. And we're going to create a new folder. And we're going to call it UI. And in here, we're going to create a new folder. And then we're going to call it title screen. There you go. And so the name of this scene should be called titlescreen.tscn. Alright, so from here, the next thing we want to do is add in a new node, and we want it to be a color rect. So we're going to type in color rect like that. I'm going to have it be a full rect. So over here, like so. Now the color you want for this is arbitrary. I'm going to choose a purplish color, something like this, just for it to stand out. And what we're going to add in is maybe a label just to make it clear that this is the title screen. You can customize this, so these are just aesthetic things as placeholders for now. So I'm going to just add in a label. So let's make this like 30. There we go. Tutorial game. I know it looks very basic right now, but this is just placeholder art that we're going to have. What's important here is the functionality. From here, what we're going to do is add in a HBox container. So HBox container. And under this container, what we're going to then add is a VBox container. And underneath the VBox container, we're going to then add in a button. And under the button, we're going to then add an area with a collision shape. So area 2D with a collision shape. Alright. Then what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate this button 2 more times. So 1, 2. You may not be sure what's going on here. I'll explain it very simply. What we're going to do is we're going to drag the VBox container roughly to the left middle of our screen. So over here where you see the left middle, you want to click maybe there. And maybe let's say extend it out a little bit more, like so. Maybe to the width of our title. And make the height roughly something like this. So I want to explain to you what a HBox container is. What a HBox container is whatever you add as a child to it will always be added vertically, and a VBox container always adds its children vertically to one another. So these buttons that we've added, they're now going to be stacked on top of each other because they are now children of a VBox container. So this button, for example, I may want to give it a minimum size. Let's say I want to give it a minimum size of 300 pixels by maybe 200. Alright, so I've decided to settle on a minimum size in the x-axis of 600 and a minimum on the y-axis of 100. And so what I'm going to do is copy this to the other buttons by holding control on each of the other buttons. Go into layout and paste in the value here. Then what I'm going to do is give in the value of 100 over here. So these are going to be different buttons which are going to do different things, in which our character is going to be able to use the analog stick to move up, down, and select either play, options, exit, whatever buttons you want to have over here. So if I want to separate each of these, I might want to click on the VBox container, and where the alignment is, I might want to align it in the center like so. And what the theme overrides are, I can add a constant to separate each of these buttons. So we might want to separate them by a value of maybe 10 or even 20. You can customize this to your heart's content, but this is just to give you a rough guidelines. If you do want access to this project after I am done with this video, there should be a description in the description for the Patreon where you can get access to this project, so you don't have to do the majority of the coding that I'm about to do. So once you've done this, you can maybe drag the HBox container, maybe put this in the center like so. And the next thing we're going to do is enable our collision shape. So we might want to give this a collision shape of a rectangle and drag the corners for this one over here. So now that I have these buttons, the next thing to do naturally would be to add some text to these buttons. So what I'm going to do is label each of these buttons according to what they're going to do. So the first one is going to be play. That's what the first button is going to be for us to go into the character select screen. The second one is going to be options, for us to change options regarding the size of our game, the audio, things of those nature. And lastly is going to be exit, or I could do quit. And I can easily just do a theme override. So what I could do is go to theme overrides, go to fonts. I mean, in fact, we can add our own custom font here. So what we can do is go to fonts, go to empty and click on system font. Click on that. And where this packed string array is, we can add in an element, and you can choose from all the fonts you have installed on your computer. So for example, I might want to do bakery. I don't really like that one, so I can delete that and go on to the next one. But for the sake of the video, I'll just do Arial, since that's a basic font that everybody knows. But for your own game, you might want to do a custom font you might have downloaded online. So from here, it would be best to enable multi-channel signed distance field over here. And then from here, we can customize the play button. So we can have it be large, we can have it be, let's say, 80 font size, and then for constants we can give it an outline of maybe 30. Go to the colors, and where the outline is, outline, there we go. So we can have a black outline for our play button. So I'm going to do the same thing but for the rest of the other buttons. So as you can see, all of the buttons are of the same aesthetic, and even though I have labeled the buttons themselves, I do want to label it over here just to organize everything. So I want to call this the play button. I do also want to go to the HBox container and the VBox container, and I want to do something like a buttons container. So HBox buttons containers. So for this one to be VBox button containers. So now it's more neat. And now one of the last things we're going to need to add in terms of the nodes is what we're going to call the pointer. So let me just add it in and I'll explain to you what it does. So what we're going to add in is an area 2D with its collision shape, and the collision shape is going to be a small rectangle, something like that. And what we're going to call this area 2D is pointer. Now the way this is going to work, I came up with this whilst I was programming my platform fighting game. It was simply the idea that for these buttons to be pressed with our controller, we're going to have a pointer with a finite state machine, so that when you press up and let's say you're already at play, you're automatically going to be booted to the exit. When you press down from exit, you're going to go to play. So from play you can go to options or around to exit, then from exit you can go around to play or up to options, and then from options you can either go up to play or down to exit. And this is all determined by what you press on your controller. So if you press up or down, pretty much, or up or down on the keyboard, or W or S on the keyboard, it really doesn't matter. If you press up, you'll go up from where you are. If you press down, you go down to exit. There may be a better way to do this, but when I was making this, I didn't know of any better way, so this is what I came up with. And also you might find this effective for other practical uses. So this is what I'm going to call the pointer, and this is what's going to be used for you to actually select each of these buttons. So that's what we have for now. From here we can actually move on into scripting these nodes. But before we script, actually I do need to show you the collisions. So I'm not sure if you guys have seen the other videos in this series, but if you go to projects, you go to project settings, you go to 2D physics, In layers 17, 18, 19 and 20, I do have different collision layers: UI collision, C, portrait, token and hand respectively. These are the different layers I'm going to be using for the UI scenes and the UI nodes. So what we need to do before we actually script these buttons, or we can actually do this later, but what we do need to do is incorporate these layers, as you can see. So you might just want to copy these. Alright, so in terms of the layers, what we're going to do is we're going to click on each of these area 2Ds, like so. Go to their collisions and actually put the layer on layer 17, but put the mask on mask 20. The reason why I'm doing it like this is because layer 17 is the layer for UI collision. So anything that needs to be detected, I'm going to be putting on UI collision, but anything that is going to be the detector, for example the pointer in this case, it will be on layer 20, which is why these areas are going to be detecting layer 20. For the pointer, it will be the opposite. The pointer is going to be on layer 20, but its mask, what it's going to be detecting, is going to be the UI collision mask. So it shouldn't be too difficult, it should be quite simple. Now, in terms of the buttons, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on the play button specifically, and I'm going to go over here and add a new script. I'm going to call it the play button script. I might want to add in a new folder and call it buttons, or I should call it maybe scripts. And this is going to be the scripts for the play button. So I'm going to do open and create, and the code that we're going to type in is going to look something like this. So here's the code you're going to want to type in. It is quite self-explanatory if you look at it for long enough. There's nothing more than this, but if you do want me to explain it to you, don't worry, I will. All this is simply doing is it's simply exporting a path up here, to which you're going to type in the path that you want this title screen to move to. In this case, I'm planning for it to be the character select screen, but we haven't done it yet. In the next video, I'll be able to show you how this works. But for now, we're going to export a path that this scene is going to move to. And so when the button is pressed, if this path is not empty, we're going to change scene to that path. Now all this does is it basically changes the color of the text of the button when it's highlighted. So this is going to make it clear for the player to know when what they are currently selecting. If they are currently selecting the play button and that's what they want to press, when they are on the play button, the button's going to change its outline color to, let's say, something like orange, which is what I've selected. I've selected orange. So that's what all of this is doing. So in terms of the connections that we have to make with this play button, it's actually quite simple. All we need to do is go to the script, and where it says on press, I'm going to copy that text, click on the play button, and where it says pressed here, I'm going to connect it back to itself by clicking on it, and then paste where it says on pressed. Then where it says on area 2D area entered, I'm going to connect the area 2D to the play button. So I'm going to copy this, go to area entered and connect it to its parent. So I'm going to paste the method over here, connect. Then I'm going to do the same thing but for area exited. So I'm going to highlight over this, copy that, go to area exited over here, double click on this, then click on its parent and then paste the method. And then lastly, the last two things that we would have to do is go to the play button, and where it says on focus entered, you want to copy this. Then where it says focus entered over here, you want to double click that, go to the play button and then paste in the method, press connect. And then lastly, do the same thing but for focus exited. So click on this, go to the play button, go to focus exited, make sure you're on the play button and then paste the value of focus exited. So it's actually quite simple. And now I'm basically going to repeat this same method but with the options and the exit buttons. However, the option buttons aren't going to do anything yet, because for us to create an options menu, we're going to have to create a new scene. So I might have to do it in like another video or a bonus Patreon video. And speaking of the Patreon, don't forget to check it out in the description down below, where you get access to all of the scripts and all of the files that I have in my tutorial videos, as well as the Discord in case you need one-on-one support or help. And on top of that, I also have bonus videos that are coming out, and I've uploaded some already. So if you do need extra help, and if you do want like a deeper understanding on how to program this, or if you want it to be more tailored to your own game, don't forget to check out the Patreon and message me there. So with that being said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically copy the same method but for the options button and the exit button. In terms of the exit button, it's pretty much the same thing. You want to add a new script, make sure it's called exit button within the folder that we created, which is scripts. Open it, create, and the code you want to type in should look something like this. So as you can see, it's pretty much the exact same thing, except we do not have a path variable. Instead, obviously, because this is the exit button, if you press this button, the game is just going to quit. So what I'm going to do is reconnect the different signals that need to be connected for this button to work. So as you can see over here, I've added up all the signals, and you can see that I have them added up because of all the green symbols I have over here. So the last thing I'm going to be working on here is the options button. Now, in terms of the option button, it's pretty much going to be the exact same thing as the play button. Click on the option button, add a script, call it option buttons, put inside the scripts folder, and the code you're going to want to type in is going to look something like this. Now what you're going to notice about the option button is that it's pretty much the exact same thing as the play button, but instead of it being, let's say, play button focus exited, is going to be the options button focus exited. So the way this option button is going to work is when you press this option button, you're going to move to another scene where you're going to have access to all your options, including the full screen option, something to do with volume, and other things that I might put into a new video. So once you've attached the signals like I'm about to do, we can then move on to add in the last script, which is going to be for the title screen. So as you can see, I've added in all the signals, since you can see the green symbols over here, and the last thing now that we're going to add to our title screen is the title screen script. So what we're going to do is click on the title screen and add in a new script called title screen. Make sure it's under the script section, open and create. And the code you're going to want to type in is going to look something like this. So this is the code you're going to want to type in. It does look quite complicated, but once I've explained it to you, it's not going to be too difficult for you to understand. We have a state machine with the 3 different states corresponding to the 3 different buttons. If either player presses select, the pointer is going to detect which area is currently overlapping it. Depending on which area it is, if it's play, option or exit, it's going to emit the signal pressed for that button. So for example, if the play button was emitted press, what's going to happen in the play button is it's going to change its scene to that of the path. If the exit button was emitted the press signal, then the game is going to quit. So this is an example of what will happen when the press signal is emitted for each of these buttons. And this mini state machine that we have over here is going to change the current state to the next state. So if you're from play, you can either go to options or exit, options to play, and from options you can go to play to exit. And for each of these states, it will execute a function which will teleport the pointer's position to that of that button. Alright, so in the example of the play state, you can see we have this play function over here. So what this will do, for example, is it's going to get our pointer, it's going to get its global position and put it into the vector of 444,521. So if I was to get this pointer, 444,521, for example, would be somewhere around here. So our pointer's now overlapping with the play button. This then works with when either player presses the select button, because when either player presses the select button, the detector is going to check for overlapping areas. In this case, the overlapping area would be the play button. So if I go back to the script, because it's the play button that it's overlapping with, it's then going to emit the press signal for the play button. And once it does that for the play button, if you go to the play button, what happens when it's pressed? Well, it's going to change scene to that of the path. So that wraps it up pretty much for the coding part of this section, and now I can demonstrate to you all of this working together. So for the last part of this video, I'm going to demonstrate the project working. So all I'm going to do is run the project and see if it works. I did enable the collision shapes just to make sure the collisions are working properly. But lastly, this should be it. So the options is working, exit's working, but it does seem that the pointer is shifted down by 1. So I can close the project, and all I need to do is go to the title screen, and for the play function, all I'm going to do is get the pointer, move it to where the play button is, and take note of its position. So its position, for example, is 500 and 415. So all I'm going to do is go to the title screen, and for the vector 2 here, I'm going to do 500 and then 415. Then I'm going to check for the options as well, and so now I can start up the project again and see if it works. So it starts with the play. Everything is working except for the options. So the options I need to fix. What I need to do is get the pointer, move it up to options, take note of its y-axis, and it was 542, not 442. So now I'm going to start the project again, and lastly this should work. So play, options, and exit. And what's in the opposite direction if I press enter? Alright, so it seems like the state machine is working, but actually pressing the select button isn't. So the next thing I have to think about is why that's the case. Alright, so I figured out the problem actually. It's quite simple. When you press the UI select button for either player 1 or player 2, it detects the name of the button itself. So because I named the buttons in this tutorial play button, option button, and exit button, it wasn't able to detect for the name play, option, and exit. So I can either change this to play, option, and exit like so, or I could have changed this to play button, option button, and exit button. So with that all being done, I can now go to the 2D scene and then start the project, and it should work when I press exit. There you go. And that wraps up for this video. If you want access to the scripts and files in this video, or you want access to more bonus videos, check out the Patreon. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial, and in the next video I'm going to be working on the character select screen. And so with that being said, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.